but we want to respect that you came to a town hall meeting. We have just enough time for a couple questions, and because we don't have a portable mic, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have you stand up and speak loudly, those that have a question, and Dr. Paul will be positioned right up in the front row so we can hear the question, and we have enough mic, I think, that he'll be able to answer the question from the mic. Okay, this is how a little bit. Yes, sir.
Mr. Paul?
So the people in the back can hear too, so bring your volume up a little bit.
All right. Mr. Paul, what are you going to do about Iran? There's something going on there, and we're kind of worried about it. I would say everyone I know is. So what are you going to do about it as president?
I think it's a good question because I'm worried about it too, but maybe not in the same way that some others worry about it. I worry about us overreacting on Iran like we did in Iraq, because the war drums were beating for quite a few years on Iraq until there was enough support to invade Iraq. And one of the excuses for going into Iraq was 9/11. But Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. The Al-Qaeda wasn't there. They had no weapons of mass destruction. The decision to invade Iraq and start that war occurred years before. My first speech against the war in Iraq was 1998, because the policy was changed. It was changed to regime change. Even though Iraq had never attacked us and bad dictator, but think of the cost that we went in there. We're supposed to be out of there right now, but we are not out of Iraq. There's still troops there. We have the largest embassy in the world. We've lost thousands of men and women in the military. Thousands have been injured. So that was a bad war. I think what is going on now is not too dissimilar with Iran. Iran is not a physical threat to us. They do not have capabilities. The stories you might hear about them on the verge of a nuclear weapon, it's not true. By our CIA and by the United Nations, they are not on the verge of it. Does that mean I don't care? Yeah, I care. I don't want them to get a weapon. And yet, if they did get a weapon, some of the people who have been the most anxious to go to war against Iran, because we got to go in and bomb them because they might be making one and we're going to bomb their sites, which is going to start a bigger war over there. But some of the people at AEI, which is the neoconservative group that wants us to go in there, they made a statement the other day, and they said, you know what we have to worry about? They said, you know, what if Iran gets a weapon and they don't use it? That's what they're worried about, because then Iran would become credible, and there they have a weapon and they didn't use it, and all their fear-mongering didn't work. That is their biggest worry right now, is they're going to get a weapon and they don't do it. But that would be logical. Who are they going to bomb? If they have one or two bombs, they're going to bomb Israel. Israel has 300 of them. And our submarines are all around there. Pakistan has them, India has them, and everything else. So Iran's a long story. I don't think sanctions will help. We put sanctions on there, and in the debate in the Senate, they said, you know, these sanctions are going to hurt the people, not the government, which is always the case. We had sanctions on Iraq for 10 years, and Madeleine Albright admitted 500,000 children died because we destroyed their infrastructure and prevented medications from going in. But what the senator said on the House floor when they talked about, you know, sanctions will hurt the children and the people, he says, well, that's exactly what we want to do. Well, that's not the way to win friends and get along with people, saying that you'd like to destroy and hurt the people. But this has been going on a long time, and it's the foreign policy that I want to change. I think we have an unhealthy foreign policy. And that is, we started in 1953. We overthrew the government in 1953. We put in the Shah for 25 years. He was a ruthless dictator. We propped him up, and they still resent it. What would happen if somebody did that to us? I think we should have a golden rule in foreign policy. If any time we do something to somebody else, we should stop and think for a minute, what would it be like if they did it to us? Maybe we would. We'll go back.
I'd like to thank you for coming to Manchester, first of all. I'm one of those young people that you talked about in your speech. I'm a registered Democrat that you're on the verge of converting. And there are two reasons for that. One, I am a gay Iowan, and one thing that I do like is that you're staying out of my bedroom. And know your position. And I know that you have your feelings about it, and that's okay, but I'm not going to trust any politician that's going to be a single-issue politician this season, because that is not what our country needs. Our country needs someone like you who's going to be clear and transparent with us and create some change. And I thank you for that, because a lot of people know I'm very vocal on Facebook about gay rights issues and such. But regardless, I changed my entire profile to read Ron Paul, the only conservative I trust. So, thank you.
I'll challenge you a little bit. If you're forced to pick one issue, why don't we pick liberty? I think this is an important point, that when you legalize liberty and freedom of choice, you don't say that you endorse what people do, because everybody does different things. This would be like saying we have freedom of religion. You can pick your religion. And most of us accept this. But we don't go around, condemning people who have a different religious view or no religious view in this country. That's been pretty well accepted. But and this should be true on economic issues. People should be able to spend their money the way they want to, and that's an economic liberty. But people's lifestyles should be their own. But there should be one rule: nobody's allowed to use force. Nobody's allowed to use force to force their will on other people, and people make personal choices. If they make bad choices, they're the only ones that suffer. But if the politicians make choices and saying, this is what you can do or can't do, this list leads to just more and more trouble. So often the answer can be found in liberty and voluntarism and make these choices on our own. I think freedom brings people together, and I think you demonstrate this. That if you're not overly judgmental of other people, because you might say, I had one person say, yeah, but you have to have laws against gambling, because gambling is bad and it's going to ruin the family. I thought, well, it may be, but that's their business. As long as they suffer the consequences from their habits, that's a different story. But we tolerate it in religion, we tolerate it intellectually, but we don't tolerate it with personal habits or what we put into our bodies, what we smoke and drink and everything else. I mean, we've gotten to the point now in this country where the federal government feel compelled to prohibit people from drinking raw milk. So I think that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the fair tax. How do you feel about that?
Good question. Ask about the fair tax. I want a fair tax too, but my fair tax is a little bit different than the ordinary fair tax. My fair tax is 0, 0, 0. That takes care of the fair tax and the flat tax. It's nice and flat. But we're not on the verge of all that. My goal would be, of course, to have a society and a government so small we didn't need an income tax. And I've always supported any legislation that would reduce taxes and also reduce the power of the IRS. A fair tax fits that. But there are some shortcomings in that people who have saved money and spend it, then they have their taxes. But the biggest issue, I don't talk a whole lot about as finding the solution in tax reform. What we have to have is spending reforms. Because if spending was down to a very low level, you change foreign policy, you change the wars and the welfare state, the burden of the taxation would be so much diminished that we wouldn't have to worry too much about it. But I think tax reform, if we can't have all that we want, we have to work in that direction. I don't like the inheritance tax. I don't like the attack on, passing property on to the next generation. And I don't like taxing corporate money when it comes back into the country, because they'll keep the money out if you keep taxing them. So you could make some reforms and improve things. But the big thing is the spending. Cut the spending and the taxes will go down.
I think I'd like to know where you stand at as far as someone in the past once says Ames said he would put a 25% tax on foreign products coming to the United States, which I'm all for that because it's killing our American markets by them having cheap labor or whatever kind of labor you want to call it. There's government owned.
Right. Okay, it's an awful temptation to put the tax on imports, and I hope I don't lose your vote. I don't like taxes. And if you put a tax on imports, the people who are going to suffer are the poor people in this country because they're getting cheap products. But your argument would be, well, then we'll make those products. But it's not that simple. What happens is we undermine the economic conditions where we can't become competitive, and we don't know exactly which products should be made overseas versus here. So you want the market to decide that. But if you just put a 25% tax on imports, the poor people who might be getting tennis shoes for $20 might have to pay $100, or more if they have to pay for Americans to build them. So it isn't quite that simple. I don't like tariffs. Competitive devaluations of currencies are going on right now. They try to have trade barriers by weakening each other's currency, but that doesn't last long. Prices go up. But then it leads to tariffs, and I think the Chinese just recently put on tariffs on some cars. So now this is going to be back. We're going to be in trade wars, and that happened in the 1930s, and it did prolong it. But if you had a healthy, sound economy, and you had the right environment to compete, we can compete. We did it before. We did it all through the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't until we adapted to these Keynesian economics that we became less competitive. So it's less spending, less taxes, honest money, low interest rates. All these things would provide us the opportunity to do it. We interfere too much in labor costs too. Our labor costs we never could compete with paying nothing overseas, what they pay. But there could be more competition in labor. There should be more competition with businesses too. There should be more competition in medication, in the medical field. And that helps to drive prices down too. But just to say that we would get a lot more jobs by putting on tariffs, I wish it were so easy.